All right, we now have joining us on the Sharks Audio Network. It is Craig Button, TSN's Director of Scouting. Craig, what's going on, man? How are you doing?
I'm doing great. I'm in Dallas doing a Montreal Canadiens broadcast with the Stars. Both teams are on fire their last 13 games, so it should set up for a real nice matchup. Obviously the Montreal Canadiens success, and I was with the Stars when we won the Cup in '99 and moved from Minneapolis down here. So the roots of hockey in Dallas are really strong, and always a pleasure to be able to return to Dallas and be part of a game with two real good franchises.
Well, you speak to kind of a storyline that's going around hockey right now is just parity because Montreal has come on very strong. Dallas has obviously been a team that everyone's been looking at all year long. I don't know that I can point to one team and say that that's my definitive favorite right now, but I think that's good for the sport. There are a lot of teams in the mix right now.
Yeah, well, and I think that what you want to do is be in the discussion. And we look at sports and all the different leagues, and is there a clear favorite? Look at the NFL. What's happening? I mean, you got some great matchups, and you got to go, okay, well, who's the favorite? Like, and who could come out of it? There's four or five teams that you could say could win the Super Bowl, and I think for the NHL, you could say exactly the same thing. You start to see teams that are on a run, and you go, okay, oh boy, they're really showing it, right? Like the Edmonton Oilers right now. Well, it was the Vegas Golden Knights 2 weeks ago, and in the East, you're looking at the Florida Panthers, but Montreal Canadiens have found their way back into the playoff hunt. So this is all exciting. This is all good. Teams and organizations are in different places, and some teams are in the process of trying to get back up the mountain and trying to get into the place. Some teams are trying to climb that summit to be a Stanley Cup champion. But all in all, when you have games that have intrigue and have suspense and have the competitive, what I call tension, I think it's great. It's great for the sport, and it's not going to be like it was a few years ago when every team in the East had 100 points, and we knew at the beginning of March who was going to be in the playoffs. You got these great races going all the way through. That's awesome.
No, it is. It's good for everyone. It's good for all the fan bases. I think the longer you can keep people engaged, the better. Are there any trends that you've seen develop this year, maybe that you weren't expecting? I always, to an extent, we see some copycat ideologies in hockey, just like we do in all sports. If one team is doing something that's successful, you're going to start seeing anything, kind of bleed into the rest of the league. But this year, I feel like we're seeing all sorts of different looks and all sorts of different ways that teams are finding success. There's heavier teams, there's lighter teams, there's faster teams. You see teams play high-low, other teams I've seen a little bit of working from the blue line in at times this year more than I did a year ago, but it seems like there's different tactical identities everywhere.
Well, I think there's fundamental principles of hockey that are never going to change, just like football. If you do not establish that you can have strength at the line of scrimmage, I don't care how good your quarterback is, I don't care how good your wide receivers are, I don't care how good your running back is, you're not going to win. You have no chance of winning and having success if you don't have strength at the line of scrimmage. So I believe that in hockey, there's certain fundamental things. Defense. You need long, rangy guys. They don't have to be 6'5". They have to be able to skate. They have to be able to make a play. That's a fundamental thing. You got to be able to play inside the dots. You got to be able to attack to the net. Now, like, if you don't have players that are willing to do that, you're not going to win, and you're not going to have the success you want. Now, tactically, there's different ways to go about it with respect to the personnel you have, and different players are going to bring different things. But if you have a highly skilled player and he can skate fast and he's not going to go inside the dots, you're not going to have success. And it's the same thing with the different teams. So looking at where your players are at and how you're going to attack and how you're going to use your tactics to create advantages, whether it be high to low, whether you use the width of the ice, whether you pop out high and then work back down low. You have to be able to work inside, and you have to be able to work to the middle of the ice, and you have to be able to defend in the middle of the ice. And how you do that and how you go about it is going to be, it's going to be really, really important to recognize what players you have to do it. You're going to ask Cale Makar to do it in a different way than you're going to ask Josh Manson to do it. So Josh Manson is going to be more of it, but he's got to move the puck quick. And Cale Makar is going to have to get the defensive position quick, despite his offensive brilliance. And I think where coaches like really become adept Is it understanding, okay, this is the group that I have, and I'm going to maximize the individual abilities to maximize the potential of the team. And I think that's to your point, Ted, that we see a lot of different ways to go about it. If it was just cookie cutter, everybody would do it the same way, but not everybody has the same cookies. And now you got to cut it up a different way as well.
You brought up defenseman there, and I wanted to start there with Shakir Mukhamadullin for San Jose, who was up for a little while, but then recently got sent back down to the AHL and the Barracuda, to which I don't have a problem with, because I think the development path for every player, especially somebody as big as he is, I think that one of the things I've noted is that he still needs to fill out his frame. But I'm curious if you got a better idea of what he might be turning into as a player, because I saw aspects of his game where he had really strong defensive games, where he was really able to use his physicality and use his reach and use that big just kind of orbit that he has with the long stick. But he's also got a bomb of a shot. But I also saw still too much hesitation in his game. So where do you think he is looking at his game right now?
Well, and I think that one of the biggest things that for any player that enters the NHL, what I call thought process, and you got to be able to have a quick processor to play in the league. The league is fast. It demands that you be fast, and if you can't make decisions and do that quickly, you're not going to have success in this league. I don't care how hard you shoot or how fast you skate. You got to be able to process quickly. Now, I think in the case of Shakir, it's a part of when you say hesitation, there's a difference between hesitation and trusting yourself. I see that a lot with younger players. They're okay, I got to make the right play. Trust your instincts. Like you didn't get this far. And I think that that's part of the development process and working with your young players and saying, hey, listen, here's what you do really well. Now just go and do it. Jacques Laperriere, the Hall of Fame defenseman, great defense coach in the National Hockey League for years, said this. He said, up until about the age of 23 or 24, as a defenseman in the league, you are apprenticing. You might be playing in the league, you might be playing a lot, but you're still apprenticing. And when you hit the age of 23 or 24, now you got a real good understanding of what it takes to be successful in the league. And then depending on what your skill set is and everything, that's going to determine at playing at the level that's required to be at the NHL level and how high it can be. And I think that that's true of Shakir. I think that's true of any young defenseman. We see young defensemen come in the league, but they're still very much apprenticing. That doesn't mean they can't play, and that doesn't mean they can't have a measure of success. But that real comfort level, that real area of like, okay, I'm secure in who I am. I know what I have to do, and I'm going to do it. I think that that's part of what you see with Shakir Mukhamadullin. And you see the good, and there's two players, and ironically, they're both Russian. Shakir Mukhamadullin with San Jose and Yan Kuznetsov with the Calgary Flames, who's with the Calgary Wranglers. I think they both can play in the NHL right now. I think they're better than players that are playing on their respective teams. But it's not about if they're better right now. It's about developing to be the best they can be. And I think for Shakir being down with the Barracuda, with Kuznetsov being with the Wranglers, I think ultimately that's going to help those two franchises because those players, I believe, have everything you want. They're not top pair defensemen, but I think they're players that can be really important to the success of a team.
Will Smith, in my opinion, his greatest flaw is that he is not Macklin Celebrini, and fans will compare him as such. However, I look at his game for someone as young as he is on a San Jose Sharks team that is not a world beater right now, and I see a lot to like. My only qualm at this point is that I think he still needs to work on his skating. I think that some of the mistakes he makes are very much, at a low level for someone as young as he is. What do you see with Will Smith so far?
And he's a young player. He's still a teenager. He's not going to turn 20 until later this year or in the coming months. Will's a top player, and he's a smart player. And you'll hear this from coaches continuously. Players, Will was the leading scorer in the NCAA last year. And so, he dominated NCAA hockey. And I believe that if you haven't dominated at the level below you, there's no reason to move ahead. We can debate whether Will would have been better off staying at Boston College, but at least he dominated, and he's not leaving a situation where he hadn't had massive success. And I think that's important. Now, when you get to the NHL, yeah, the game happens fast. We just talked about processing quickly and everything. And a lot of times at the lower levels, you can get away with being a step behind or a half a step behind because you can make up for it. In the NHL, that can be fatal. you end up on the wrong. Dale Sutter, and the former San Jose Sharks coach and very successful,
He's a
and he
beaut.
talked about being so aware with your skating. He goes, he says, if you don't take a step in the right direction in the NHL, he goes, you're behind the play. And when you're behind the play in the NHL, you're not just behind, you're not going to make it up. So you better be thinking and skating to get into those right positions without the puck defensively. And I think again, Will's a work in progress. Like, and again, you see the good, you see the thinking, you see the skill, and at the same time, you also see that there's. But Mike Greer and the San Jose Sharks understand that, and I think Red Hedican, who worked with the San Jose Shark, who's now in Anaheim and doing work with them, and I really have so much respect for Brett and his experiences and talking to him. He talks about like just learning and helping the players learn. Like it's like math. We'd like every young student to learn math quickly. What are the multiplication and division tables? But everybody's going to learn at a different rate. But you got to keep working with them and help them learn. And I think that's true of Will Smith, and I think it's true of any young player. Muka Madul and Will Smith, different types of players. Macklin Celebrini's learning, and I mean, he might be a little bit more advanced, but he's going to learn, and his ability to impact the game in more significant ways is only going to increase, as it will with Will Smith as well, because he's done it at every level.
How come no one saw Macklin Celebrini being this good?
I don't know about no one. Like,
Well, but
I
he
mean,
wasn't. He. Everyone said he wasn't Connor Bedard. I felt like that was the common refrain that we heard. Maybe not 100 out of 100 people, but that seemed to be the prevailing thought.
well, I'll say this, and I watched Macklin for a number of years. Macklin dominated the USHL as a 16-year-old, dominated it. Like he was the best player in the league, and he was the rookie of the year, and he was phenomenal. He went and he played for Canada at the U18 tournament, a year younger than everybody, and dominated it. Then he went to the NCAA with Boston University, a year younger than everybody, and dominated it. I don't know how anybody could say that Macklin Celebrini wasn't a brilliant player. It was clear cut that he was the number one player in the draft last year. It wasn't close. I mean, you put his name in bold, underlined it, and said this is the first pick, and it didn't matter who was picked, and he was going to be the first pick. And I don't know why. I mean, Connor Bedard. Here's what I think happens in those situations, Ted. Connor Bedard ends up on a big stage at the World Junior Tournament and has this brilliant performance, right? So and rightfully so. I mean, he was terrific, dominated junior hockey. Macklin, USHL, Boston University, the World Junior Tournament. He was great for Team Canada. The team wasn't good. So the same type of platform that was presented to Connor Bedard wasn't there, and the same type of notoriety. And I'm going through it now, Ted. People say, "Well, how much does the World Junior Tournament change your rankings?" Like, not at all. I'm trying to build a dossier on players. I'm not trying to go, oh, he played good, therefore he's good, or he didn't play good, he's not good. And I think that what happened to Macklin is he wasn't in these, what I would call environments of notoriety where there's lots of eyeballs on it. And so now people, what I would say, it's not that no one, they didn't know. They didn't know how good he was because they weren't paying attention. If you were paying attention, you knew how good Macklin Celebrini. Him and Connor Bedard are different players.
Right.
I always said Connor Bedard was a player that had elements like Patrick Kane and those, and I felt Macklin Celebrini had elements like Jonathan Toews.
Mm-hmm.
And we're talking about two Hall of Fame players, two great players that were instrumental to Chicago Blackhawks' success. But they were different, but doesn't mean they both weren't prominent top players for the NHL draft. And Macklin's proving that. Macklin's proving that in his play with the San Jose Sharks. Not me as not one bit surprised.
No, it's been fun to watch. I think I get a little bit surprised that everybody wants to do the comparison game about who is better when we're, a second year and a first year into their respective careers. It's like, guys, we've got 2 decades to try and do the comparisons. And, I'm of the belief that comparison is oftentimes the greatest thief of joy. I'm fine with watching both of these guys develop into having great careers together and watching them, play as rivals, because I feel like that's good for everyone. I can be somebody who appreciates Macklin Celebrini and working for the franchise, but also note that if Connor Bedard is taking Chicago to the next level, that's good for everyone as well.
Well, and it's a great point. And again, like Connor Bedard's going to be Connor Bedard, Macklin will be Macklin, and they're both really secure in themselves. They know who they are. They know who they are as players. They've had massive success. So, Ted, when I say to you, the first overall pick in the 2013 draft was Nathan McKinnon, and he won the Rookie of the Year coming out as an 18-year-old. It wasn't until his fifth year that Nathan McKinnon became a superstar. Like he signed a contract after his second year, and oh boy, really, you're giving him that kind of contract? Well, we know what kind of value there was in that contract on the latter part of it. But it was his fifth year. It was his fifth year that when Nathan McKinnon went whoops like that, that's where he went. He was the first overall pick. He was the Rookie of the Year. Not everybody's on the same timeline of dominance. Nathan McKinnon is amongst the very, very best players on this planet. And right now might be the best player on the planet in terms of his impact and the way he plays. So be careful about, to your point, 18 and 19-year-olds and saying, oh, they're this. But again, I'll go back to the World Junior. I deal with it all the time. Oh, what about, are you concerned about this guy? No, I'm not. I'm not concerned about it because I've watched him for too long, be too good for too long. If you want to go watch 3 or 4 games and make up your mind on that, go ahead.
Obviously, it appears that both Chicago and San Jose are going to be in the race for the number 1 overall pick. There's once again, some very talented players up to this point. Where do you fall on drafting for need versus drafting for overall talent? Because the one knock on where the Sharks are right now is they don't have enough D-men, but also I look at some of those forwards and say, well, there's some pretty talented players in there. Where do you fall in that discussion? And then just, start looking ahead to this draft.
Well, here's what I would say. I mean, you're drafting players that are 17, 18 years old in the NHL draft. This is not the NFL. You should not be drafting on need. You should be drafting on where you're on where you project the player to be and what his impact can be for your organization. It's not about one player. It's not about the NBA. Even NFL teams drafting players that are 21 and 22 years of age, they have growing pains, going into there. So to me, but you have to look at what your organizational prospect cupboard looks like. And so if you look at your prospect cupboard and you say, okay, you need goaltenders, you need defensemen, you need forward, you need skill, you need certain types as we talk about it. So you have to look at it and say, okay, everything being equal, and rarely is it equal, but you go, okay, ideally, here's what we'd like. Here's where I'm at. Okay, so there's some centers in this draft. The last thing that San Jose Sharks need at this point in time, I'm going to need, right, is a skilled center. They have Celebrini and Will Smith, and
Right.
you got Willie Macklin, you got Quentin Muskie, who just returned from his injury, you got Halton, and they got lots of skill up front. They got Sam Dickinson coming. You talk about Muka Madul, and so if the San Jose Sharks, if it's me, this is me talking, if the San Jose Sharks have the first overall pick, it's Matt Schaefer all day long. To me, he's Drew Doughty-like. He's a number 1 defenseman that controls the game. They don't have that guy. They do not have that guy in their prospect pool. Now, if there was a player like Macklin Celebrini, you might say, well, maybe we have to consider. There isn't a player like Macklin Celebrini in the draft. So that's where you have to look at, like, organizationally in terms of projection, what you need. And everybody needs a number 1 defenseman. I mean, Ted, I don't know how many true number 1 defensemen are there in the NHL? 12, 13, 14, maybe?
Yeah.
There's 32 teams. There's not 32 number 1 defensemen. And when I compare Matt Schaefer to Drew Doughty and I say controls the game, like, that's a quality everybody wants. And I look at the San Jose Sharks. Sam Dickinson is a top-notch defenseman. Like, he's going to play big minutes and be a big. They traded for a Scaroff, so you got a number 1 goaltender that I think is going to be excellent. You got Celebrini and Will Smith at the key positions. So you got center, goal, Dickinson. Now you can get that number 1 defenseman that can control the game. Wow. That's how you build a Stanley Cup contender, and that's where I would look at it from there. So that's where we're at. That's how I see it. And if San Jose has that pick, if they don't have the first overall pick, and Schaefer isn't there, now it becomes interesting because I don't think there's another defenseman that falls into that category.
Right.
So they may just have to say, hey, listen, who can fit with our group? They don't have a player like Porter Martone either. And Porter Martone, I call him Perry Kachucks. He's like Corey Perry and the Kachuk brothers. They impact the game. And so that's where I would go. Those would be my first two guys if I was with the San Jose Sharks. I think Mike Greer might like Porter Martone as well, because Porter Martone has a competitive fire in him that has to remind Mike of Mike.
I'm just curious when you're looking at it from the outside now and you're able to compile your lists and you're able to talk about, these names, how much different is it compared to when you were an executive? Because I'm sure that when the decision's falling on you, it's got to be such a different level of intensity in trying to parse out what exactly is going to be best for your franchise. And I mean, obviously you've learned from that experience. I just wonder, when you look back, how much different is it to actually make that decision versus looking at all the data that's available?
Yeah, and one of the things I've learned, Ted, and I think that it can support me, is when you're with a team, and every team's list is different, and teams can say that player doesn't fit our profile. We know he'll play in the NHL. We know that, but that's not somebody that fits what we're looking for. And that's all fair. It doesn't mean you don't recognize that other players are good. You just say, hey, that's not a player that fits for us. And we're going to pass it on. And that's where you start to delineate between players. And I think for me, being with a team, you could do that. We used to call it the right-hand column. We said players that we know are going to play in the NHL, but like they just don't fit our criteria in this area of the draft. And so we're going to put an emphasis on these attributes and this criteria. And I think what I learned is you learn that there's players that can fit any different type of team and that are going to play in the NHL. So my list tries to reflect that. But where I've gone, and I've gone back a little bit to the team, I want players that can help me win. I have gone now back to establishing that the players at the top of my list, those are the guys that I think can help you win. And so when I talk about Matt Schaefer and I say Drew Doughty, that's a guy that helps you win. When I say Porter Martone and I say Perry Kachucks, let's just go back to those drafts. Corey Perry was the 28th pick in the draft. Go back and look at the 03 draft. There's no question he should have been a top 5 pick.
Yeah.
Matthew Tkachuk and Brady Tkachuk, Matthew after Austin Matthews, there's no other player you want ahead of Matthew Tkachuk. He went 6th. Brady Tkachuk went 4th. Rasmus Dahlin's a heck of a player, but there's no reason to believe that Brady Tkachuk isn't a player that if you want to win in this league, you better get players you feel can help you win. Tom Brady, the other day on his broadcast during the NFL game, said there's a difference between stars and champions. He said there's a lot of stars in the NFL, but are you prepared to do the things that a champion does? That's the hard thing when you're dealing with 17 and 18-year-olds, because you got to try to project that. And what environment are you going to put them in that can help develop that? It's not like you can look and go, oh, they don't have that. They've had success, but that's the decision-making that you have to go through.
Is that process that Mike Greer is going through right now, where he's constantly talking about not wanting to rush things? Is he, and I know it's hard to judge, but from an outsider's perspective, is he doing it, quote unquote, the right way, or is he doing it the way that he sees as best leading to success? Because the thing I keep on coming back to is people have talked about getting stuck in an endless rebuild. And I always say, well, if there was a clear-cut path to getting back into contention, that everyone would do that. But there clearly is not.
You're so right, Ted. There isn't. And if it'd be really easy if there was just one way to win or there was just one way to rebuild. Here's what I'll say about Mike. Mike had a lot of success playing in the NHL. He played on some really good, strong teams. So from that experience that Mike has from playing and being part of those good organizations, he was a competitor. I've watched Mike play when he was at St. Sebastian's in prep school in New England. He was like that, when he was a late round draft pick, and he just worked and worked and worked to find his way and be a player that you wanted on your team. You wanted Mike Greer on your team. So there's no way Mike is not going to respect skill. He played with highly skilled players. He played with, but Mike knew who he was, and he knew that there was different components to making up a team, and he was a big component of successful teams. Having that understanding, I think, is really important. I think Mike benefits from a couple of other experiences that he has. He worked with the New York Rangers, so he saw that, and he got his feet wet in there as they were trying to rebuild and trying to reposition their team. He's also got the benefit of his father and his brother in the NFL. understanding that like you can have all the great receivers in the world. If you don't have tight ends, you don't have an offensive line, you can have a great quarterback. You need all these elements to be a really good team. I think Mike benefits from that. He's a highly intelligent guy. He's a highly competitive guy. And Mike's going to take all of his experiences and apply them. I think that's the benefit for the San Jose Sharks. I think that's one of the big things. And I think Mike recognizes it. Listen, he never hesitated in making the trade for Yaroslav Askarov. He knew to get a top goaltender, and you're projecting. You go, no, I got to get this guy now, and he pounced. Drafting Celebrini, drafting the different players that he has. Mike understands that NHL and NHL teams to be successful need a whole collection of different types of players that can excel at their different positions. And I think he's gone about it in a really positive way. And you don't want to be in this endless cycle of like, okay, we're in a rebuild, we're just getting picks, we're getting picks. Everybody you can go to the bottom and get all these picks. You need to build a team with players, and that means different types of players. And I think Mike has a strong understanding of it. For me, Ted, and I believe the San Jose Sharks are on exactly the right path to get back to where they were a serious contender year in, year out.
Greg, you're the best. I appreciate your time as always, and I hope to see you soon. All right.
Yeah, thanks, Ted. I'm going to be in San Jose for the Montreal Canadiens game. I think on what day is that? That might be February 4th.
Sounds right. Yeah. Excellent. Well, we
Yeah.
will see you then.
Okay, thanks, Ted.